Welcome to Does It Matter by Brainy Ballers, where we dissect the game with cutting-edge analytics to give you the upper hand. We analyze everything from hand sizes to average depth of targets to uncover hidden trends that no one else sees. Say goodbye to guesswork and hello to data-driven domination. Because here at Brainy Ballers, we don't just watch the game, we understand it. So get ready, it's podcast time.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping headfirst into a question that gets debated a lot, especially around draft time. Can the NFL combine broad jump actually, predict success for wide receivers in the NFL?
That's the big one we're tackling.
Yeah, so for this deep dive, we've looked at findings from a pretty big analysis covering the top 50 fantasy football finishers each year since 2003. We're using PPR scoring points per reception. And just for clarity, when we say bottom 10, that's the guys finishing 41st to 50th among wide receivers.
Right. And our mission here really is to pull out the most important nuggets from all this data, especially for you if you're trying to figure out what really signals success, what metrics actually matter when you cut through the noise.
Okay, so let's get into it. The initial thought, the first approach was, well, let's just average the broad jumps for different groups, right? Top guys, bottom guys. But honestly, it was surprisingly tough to spot any real trends there. The averages chart just didn't really pop.
A bit flat, wasn't it? Didn't immediately scream, aha, or anything like that.
Exactly. Felt like maybe we were barking up the wrong tree initially.
So what got interesting was shifting how we looked at it. Instead of just averages, we built this differences chart. Basically, think of it like trying to find specific measurement ranges where players were, significantly more likely to be successful compared to others.
Okay, like looking for hot spots in the data.
Precisely. And that first pass pointed towards a range between 125 and 145 inches.
125 to 145 inches. Okay, that sounds like a solid range, but how does that actually stack up when you compare the really elite guys to, say, the ones just cracking the top 50?
Right, that's the crucial comparison. So we tested that 125 to 145 inch range. We started with our baseline, the bottom 10 finishers, those 41st to 50th ranked guys. Out of 111 wide receivers in that group who actually did the broad jump, only about 20.7% landed in that 125 to 145 range.
Okay, so about 1 in 5 for the bottom group.
Exactly. Now, here's where it gets really interesting.
Do you want to start dominating your drafts? At BrainyBallers.com, we've researched every metric under the sun for you to find which ones are best linked to fantasy points. You can access hundreds of metrics to sharpen your scouting ability so you know which metrics matter and which are just noise. Stop guessing on which thresholds to look for within each metric. Big numbers can be misleading or irrelevant. Our Ultimate Athlete Blueprints reveal essential scouting metrics, their importance and benchmarks within each metric that help predict a player's probability of being a success or bust. Elevate your scouting ability with Brainy Ballers' Ultimate Athlete Blueprints today. Click the link in the description. Now back to the show.
When we looked at the top 10 finishers since 2003, we had 112 players with broad jump data there, and a full 30.4% of them were in that same 125 to 145 inch range.
Wow. Okay, so that's a jump.
Yeah, that's a 9.7% increase. So clearly that range shows up more often among the very top performers. There's a higher prevalence.
That's fascinating. So finding that range was step one, but it sounds like you could dial it in even more. Did the deep dive go further?
It did, yeah. We kept refining it. The analysis pinpointed an even tighter sweet spot. The range that shows up most significantly more often in the top 10 compared to the bottom 10, like 15.1% more often since 2003, is actually 126 to 138 inches.
126 to 138 inches. Got it. That feels like the key takeaway on prevalence then.
That's the optimal range, yeah, purely based on how often it appears in top guys versus others.
Okay, but here's where maybe it gets a bit tricky for people listening. We see this range, 126 to 138, showing up way more often in top performers. But then you also mentioned standard statistics tell a different story. How do those two things fit together? It sounds almost contradictory.
That's a really important point, and yeah, it can seem confusing. Think of it like this. Imagine you notice lots of top chefs wear white aprons. The white apron has high prevalence among them, right? You see it a lot. But does the apron cause them to be a good chef?
No, of course not. It's just something they happen to wear.
Exactly. The broad jump is kind of like that in this analysis. It's present more often in that 126 to 138 range for top players. That's the prevalence. But when we look at actual statistical correlation using a measure called a Pearson value, where 0 means no link at all, the value between broad jump and fantasy production was tiny, just 0.023.
0.023, that's really low.
Means there's almost no direct statistical predictive power. The jump itself isn't driving the success, statistically speaking. For comparison, think about running back draft capital, something most people agree matters. Its Pearson value is around negative 0.234. Much, much stronger link, even if negative.
So wait, more top guys are in that 126, 138 range. But the jump itself doesn't statistically predict their success. How does that work?
That's the key distinction, prevalence versus correlation.
And you also noted that this trend held up across the decades mostly, but maybe dipped a tiny bit recently.
Yeah, a quick note on that. The study saw similar patterns across the last 2 decades, but the prevalence of that 126 to 138 range did drop slightly by about 2.9% in the most recent decade compared to the one before. Not a huge shift, but worth mentioning.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, the main takeaway for you listening seems pretty clear. Don't bank on the broad jump alone to predict wide receiver success. It really makes you rethink how much weight to give some of those isolated combine drills, doesn't it?
It does, but the nuance is if you are going to factor in the broad jump as maybe one small piece of a much bigger puzzle, then this research suggests focusing on that 126 to 138-inch range simply because it's found more often among the top fantasy finishers. It's maybe a small positive indicator, but certainly not a standalone predictor.
Right. So here's the final thought for you to chew on. What does it mean when a metric like the broad jump in this case shows up more often with successful players, prevalence, but doesn't actually correlate strongly with or predict that success? This deep dive really highlights how crucial it is to look at the whole picture, multiple data points in context, rather than getting fixated on just one number when you're evaluating prospects or trying to make predictions. What you see isn't always what matters most.